Yeah. Well, anyway, I am Karl. I started teaching here in this college, actually, 6 years ago this month. And I ended just my 6th year. And before that, I spent almost 30 years in New York in journalism as a visual storyteller. I was, you know, in journalism, there's writing, there's photography, but there's also information graphics and the sorts of, you know, maps and charts and cutaways of Bradley fighting vehicles and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, it was definitely the right thing for me to be doing. I'm sort of ADD, and New York sort of keeps me interested every day. You never know what's going to happen in journalism. You're like a fireman, you know, ding-a-ling-a-ling. And I really loved it. And I found out that teaching is just the same way. You know, it's just worse. I never know what to expect when I'm as a teacher now. And I've never been so engaged and had so much fun in my life. I keep getting asked to go back to that world, and you know, it's tempting, but I just still love the teaching part. I have 700 students next semester in 2 classes. No, that's next fall. So anyway, but it was, you know, it was a whole different life, and you know, I was a storyteller, you know, and that's why I threw, you know, and she mentioned Newsweek. I was the director of graphics at Newsweek for 10 years, and I was the guy in charge when the planes were hitting the World Trade Center down the street, and so my team and I did all the graphics explaining that attack. Princess Di, you know, every story, every election, every new technological finding. We had to do graphics explaining the new technology or the new medical device or the new, you know, how $700 billion is going to bail out the economy. Whatever it was, we had to learn all about it really fast and then explain it to 30 million people. And it was really fun, you know, to learn something just enough to get yourself in trouble at a party, like, well, let me tell you about a graphite reactor. I did the 1-column graphic explaining it, and you know, and you're talking like to a nuclear physicist who thinks you're an idiot, and that's okay. And now I'm often just one step ahead of the students, you know. So anyway, you know, but what I'm here to talk about is students, because you know, I still see myself as a learner and I'm constantly learning. I know a lot of people actually who are they're done. They grew up, now they're done. They're in their 30s or 40s or 50s and they're done. No more learning. I don't want to. No, I do not do internet stuff. I don't learn how to, you know. And you know, I think that hurts students, and it hurts them. I mean, learning just keeps you young and growing. You know, I'm going to talk about a lot of different 5 literacies. You know, there are so many literacies; it can be overwhelming. It's like this ocean of information. Like, how do we do all of this? And you know, and I'm going to talk mostly about one of them, but I'm going to talk about the other 4 too, in some depth, but mostly about one of them. But they're all important, and there are many more, but these are the ones I think are important, and I'll get to that. You know, when you're, you know, this is not some suburban city in Lansing or Palos Verdes, California, where I spent a lot of time. This is the Andes of South America. I grew up at 5 years old to 10 years old in Colombia, South America, deep in the Andes. The nearest paved road was 70 miles away. I was a kid in the jungle, basically. We rode horses to school. 1-room schoolhouse. 1st grade was the 1st row, 2nd grade was the 2nd row, 3rd grade was the 3rd row. Husband and wife team, 1 through 5, 6 through 8, or 5 through 8, or whatever it was. And I was down there for a long time, and you know, and there wasn't a lot you had to know. I mean, there were no distractions. It was, you know, there was no. I got a Dick Tracy radio for Christmas. You know, the walkie-talkie, Dick Tracy. For those of you young people, Dick Tracy was a comic strip, and they talked on their handheld radios from the 30s. And I got one of those, and boy, we could really work them. You know, like it made kick the can. Like we kicked everyone's butt because we could always tell when we were where we were. I mean, we could lie, we could cheat. Cheating is good. But there wasn't a lot going on. We had no TV. I didn't see my first TV till I was 11 years old. And then it was, you know, a news program, actually. It was my first television experience in Cali, Colombia. It was in Spanish. So that's me in the foreground, and that's my brother with a rifle. And there was a whole dynamic. But what we loved about playing kick the can and playing and sitting around campfires and camping out in the middle of South America it was fun. We were kids, and it was really all about this word. It was about storytelling. I don't know about any of you go camping, but what we all love, and it never goes away unless you're dead, we love to have fun, and we love to hear stories. And we love to tell stories. We don't want people to tell our stories. There's some people whose stories you don't want to hear because they're like so boring, and we'll talk about that in a second. They're just like, oh my God, when's she going to leave? But for the most part, we love fun, and we love great storytellers, great stories and great storytellers. And really, that's kind of the core issue that I'm going to be talking about today, is storytelling. Because almost everything we do, teaching in front of a class, job hunting, if you're job hunting, you're telling your story. We're telling stories. You're trying to get donations from somebody, from groups of people. You're trying to sell a product. You're trying to sell something. It's all storytelling. In the end, is that person I'm communicating with having fun? And am I telling this story so that they're not going to forget it? And they're going to remember me, my organization, my cause, my business, my product, whatever it is. Everything comes down to storytelling, good storytelling. And that's why these literacies, I think, are important. So I say there are 5 communication literacies. And why? Why is it so important that in the old days, Dick Tracy radio was fine. Dick Tracy. That was, I was one of those forgotten kids in school. There are those kids that do all of the testing and the math and the science and the English and all that stuff perfectly well. I was not one of those people. I was so not that guy that that my grades were horrible. I was in the principal's office all the time. My own father said he would not send me to college, pay for my college, and he didn't. And I have never been to college. I'm just a high school graduate. And it is no thanks to my teachers. And I appreciate now, there was one teacher, and he was a political science teacher, who got me, I guess. And while the whole rest of the class was writing a big term paper, he said, illustrate a political cartoon on this issue. I was like, really? Are you freaking kidding me? Everyone else is writing a 1.5-page report. You, Karl, you do a political cartoon on the same topic, but make it freaking amazing. And I did. And it was this international issue, and he spoke my language, and he got me. My own parents didn't, but that guy did. And I'll never forget that guy, because he made me feel intelligent for the first time in my life. And I always knew I was a smart kid. I always knew it, but no one else believed it, because I was one of those, what I call lost boys, one of the forgotten kids. And I realize everybody has they have to complete certain things, and they have tests and testing and funding and all that stuff, and it's all important. But there are ways that all boats can rise with the tide, and that's what we really want to do. And it's really trying to appreciate, as teachers, how people can be successful. And that's a hard thing to recognize. And it takes, you all have 110 students whose names you all remarkably remember every day. And I don't understand that, or whatever you have. It's a lot of students, and you remember their names. I don't. But the reason these literacies are important is because nowadays, things are tough. Things are more complicated for kids. They're not worse. They're just more complicated. There's more stuff going on in their lives. And it's all, they say that students can multitask. They can't multitask. If you get bored, go look on YouTube for Karl Gude and why, and Facebook in the classroom. Look that up. And I did a video with my students on the use of Facebook in the classroom. They can't multitask, but they think they can, but they can't. Their grades are worse, there's studies out and all of that. But so how do you get kids to actually feel engaged and compelled to actually feel intelligent and do intelligent things and succeed at something? And the reason that's important these days is because in the old days, it didn't matter if you could do some of the literacies I'm going to talk about. If you wanted to publish something, we all made home movies, home movies. There was no place to publish them. You weren't in a theater. You could write a book or a short story, but no magazine was going to publish your story, maybe, unless you were amazingly lucky and good and connected and all that, or your book. It didn't matter. You know, maybe you get an A on a paper, and that was what your target audience was, but not now. In the old days, all the rich people had all the influence. The Hearst newspapers and the big NBC, CBS, those people had power and influence because they had eyeballs. They had the money to publish. Now we publish anytime, anything, all the time, whatever we want. And if it's a good story, you've got millions of people paying attention. And that's diminished the power of the old-fashioned previous influencers. In the old days, I worked for Newsweek. Guess what? A year after I left, my staff, my department of 10 people at Newsweek, 1 year later, it was one part-time guy. Gone. Get rid of him. Newsweek is like, it's newsletter now. It's ridiculous. No one reads Newsweek. I ask my big classes, how many of you read? Nobody reads it. Nobody. I will not be around. No one cares. They're consuming information everywhere. Everyone's putting out information, and that's why it's important for you guys to get these literacies into the heads of these kids, because if they're going to compete for influence and eyeballs and their story to be heard, they've got to be better than all the millions of people out there telling those stories. It's no longer just trying to get your book published or trying to get your magazine. Now you're competing with your little sister and your best friend. If you want to find a job, you've got to find a back door to get to that person you want to interview with. Twitter, back door. Writing a letter, mailing it, or an email is so last millennium. There are so many other ways to do that. So I'm going to talk about some of these technologies. We're all publishers now is the point. And that's why it's important that we know how to communicate, because we're all publishers. You all are all publishers. So that's my son. The theme is going to be my son, because I took all the pictures and I have to get permission. I just put this together today. I've never done this before. That's my son in the blue bathing suit, Eric. When you're kids, you are just a crazy, wonderful, playful person. And a lot of that is because of your imagination, which brings the very biggest literacy. Creative literacy. When you're kids, you're creative. You've heard these before. You ask a bunch of kindergartners, how many of you, are creative? They don't even know what the word means. Okay. How many of you are artists? Everybody raises their hands. You ask them that, and when they're 5th grade, not me. That's my, I play the guitar. I'm not creative. It's my brother. That's my sister. That's the guy down the hall in the cubicle with the candy cane socks. That guy's creative, not me. You want to talk to my brother. Ed, down on the 2nd floor. He's the creative one at this organization. He's so funny. Look at his mustache. He waxes it and curls it. Oh my God, that guy's so creative. He wears weird shirts. Well, the fact is that creativity is a literacy. And the reason it's a literacy is because it can be learned, or may I say unlearned. We have to unlearn, all of you and me and every kid in our city, every older kid in our classes, their brains are the amalgamation of everyone else's expectations. It's just this mud of their teachers, their parents, their brothers, their friends, their psychologists, everyone, their boyfriends, their girlfriends. That's what happens to you. You become a patterned thinker. You become a thinker like everyone else, because that's how you get along in this world. You think like everyone else. You rock the boat, you speak up, you say something stupid, everyone points at you and says, you're an idiot. Ooh, get that guy away from me. He's weird. And so we learn, our brains are comfortable thinking in safe patterns. And that's what this toothpaste thing is going to be. But like I was going to do some consulting in Washington, and the guy wrote me, it was a defense organization, and I said, I'd like to do an afternoon on the creative process. And he said, and I emailed this. I didn't hear back for 2 days. I get this email that says, Karl, you know, everyone here is really uncomfortable with the idea of the creative process because nobody can draw and nobody's an artist. And I wrote back saying, I could show you the email. I said, look, you can look this up. IBM just came out with a study in 2010 of 1,500 CEOs in 60 nations in 33 industries asking what the number one most important quality of a new employee was. And it used to be things like skills-based. Now it's creativity. The ability to throw creative solutions at complex problems in this crazy world we live in. And he wasn't looking for painters. He's looking for creative thinkers. And so I wrote him that, and he said, OK, we'll do it. We're all afraid of it, but we'll do it. Because they're all comfortable. Their brains are comfortable not thinking that way. It's all about problem solving. It's not about painting with a moo-moo on and paint in your ear and up your nose, although I am a painter and I've always got paint up my nose. And the toothpaste thing, that is because there was a toothpaste manufacturer this is a while ago, I don't know when, like over a decade ago, needed to sell more toothpaste. So I asked my students, what do you think they did? They actually came up with a creative solution to selling more toothpaste. This is a class of 300 in my creative process class. I also teach a class in social media, visual storytelling. I teach a lot of different classes here. Asked 300 students in my creative process class, how did they solve this problem? What do you think they did? Now, of course, we're not doing anything that is creative to brainstorm this problem. I'm just asking a bunch of people sitting in chairs. And then, you know, a lot of hands went up. Yeah, threw more money at advertising, lowered the price. Everything they said was pattern predictable thinking. And I said, do you really think these people didn't try all those things? Taken out in the New York Times, you know, everything? Nothing was working. They were going down the toilet. So you know what they did? And this was probably as a result of some sort of a creative brainstorming session. They came up and invented the new big mouth tube. Do you remember the big mouth tube? Some of the older folks in here we may remember when everything used to be this little skinny pencil, like pencil eraser size of toothpaste. All of a sudden, it's like it's an oil can of toothpaste. And they'd show people with just foam bursting out of their mouths. And their mouths were cleaner and fresher than anybody's. And we all had to have it. Flew off the shelves. Pretty soon, everybody had the big mouth tube. But it got them out of the red. Or was it the black? I never can remember. They made them better. So, and you know, maybe that was through some sort of word association or whatever. But there is a process called the creative process, which I'm going to look at right now. So the creative process, I actually made, this is mine. I was curious. These elements have to be present too for the creative process to be successful. I'm sure there are more things, but basically these are the three things that I think have to be present. You first need a problem to solve. You can't just tell kids, be creative. There's a big chalkboard, go be creative. They're going to draw the same little Popeye person they draw all the time or whatever it is, but they're not being creative. There's no reason to be creative. They need a reason. They need a purpose. By the way, I'm going to have this up on, I'm going to upload this to SlideShare, and we'll send you a link, so you don't have to even take, although not everything I'm saying is on here. But so you need a problem to solve. The second thing you need is knowledge of the issue. You can't have a brainstorming session when nobody knows anything about the topic or the subject. And you can't usually, and you need a creative brainstorming environment. And the reason I say that is what happens in most companies and in most classrooms is you say, all right, we're all going to think of new ideas. What happens, you know, I've been in these meetings where you get called into the editor or the board of directors conference room, and you walk in, it's all like, you know, wood, and there's a legal pad on everyone's chair with a bottle of water and a pencil perfectly sharpened right in the middle of the pad that someone placed there perfectly. And you sit there and you look around and people start filling in and they start filling in the chairs and they're all really nervous and it's like nobody wants to be there. And then the boss finally walks in and everybody just shuts up because the boss walked in. And the boss says, okay, so we have this issue. What are we going to do about it? Everybody just shoots down to their pad and starts doodling because they haven't got a clue what to do about it, and never will, and certainly not in that environment. So you have to create and generate an environment where the creative process can fester. And like the book called Game Storming, which I got, which is just this little thin paperback. It's got all sorts of things you can do with Post-it notes and kids, great games you can play. You have to get all these executives in their pajama bottoms practically in a room and with lots of food and blasting music and big blank walls and paper and pencils and color and really let them be crazy and be kindergartners, but all with some structure. So now what I did is I combined. So if you have a problem to solve and you have a creative brainstorming session but no knowledge of the issue, so you've got a problem and you have a creative environment but nobody in there knows anything about hydroelectric power, what you're going to come up with is a bunch of dumb, useless ideas that don't mean anything to anybody, and they're ridiculous. No one would ever implement these ideas. If you have a problem to solve and knowledge of the issue but no creative ideas, you're going to get the toothpaste issue when I asked in that boardroom. No creative environment, but you have knowledge and a problem to solve, you're going to get that CEO saying, what are we going to do? Answers, how about you? George, you wear the candy cane socks. What are we going to do? George doesn't have a clue either. He just wears frickin' candy cane socks. So you're going to wind up with pattern, predictable, useless non-solutions. That's going to make things worse. Because they're going to think they're probably better, but they're not. And if you have a creative brainstorming environment and knowledge of the issue but no problem to solve, what you have is a consultant. You basically have a person looking for a problem to solve. I'm not really a consultant, but so those are the sweet spot is to have all three of them. Oh, I had all these words: dumb ideas, predictable, and you're basically a consultant. So the creative process. I'm just going to talk about this for a second. You can look this up online. There are really broken down, detailed steps. I've broken it down into 5 basic ones. But there are a lot of details. Just look up the creative process and the word steps. You'll find a lot of information, a lot of different types. There's a lot of stuff out there. You just have to look for it. So first you have to research the problem. What is the problem? You got to do a lot of research. Really investigate. And this is fun for students. Let's find out. Let's really research the problem. Pollution out there in the stream. We're going to really research this. Then you have to make sure you're asking the right question, because maybe you're going to say, how do we clean up that pollution in that pond or in the river? How do we clean that up? What are we going to do? You spend all of your resources trying to figure out how to clean up the problem. Maybe what you should be asking is, how do we stop the pollution from, in the river? And not how to clean it up, but how to stop it. It takes a lot of thinking to make sure that the question you're answering, that you're throwing all this creativity at, is the right question, the right problem to solve. So that's another big issue. Then once you got that answered, you got to throw ideas at it. Throw lots and lots of ideas at it. Like, it's called divergent to convergent thinking. You cover a wall in Post-it notes with single word or single phrase ideas, and then everybody goes up and silently groups them, and this happens much better with bigger groups, whole classes even. It's really great for them to feel like they're part of a problem-solving solution issue. They're like, everybody think of 20 things that 20 words that we can think about that will help maybe solve this problem. And they don't even have to be related. But there's a lot of information on this. There's not enough time to really get into this, but divergent to convergent thinking is the main thing. Oop, wrong way. Let me just get back to these. Sorry, you guys. I'm not a big Then you need, now, these people are called negative. Negative thinkers. You're negative. All they do is tear your idea apart in a company. Oh, that's never going to work. Yeah, well, too bad for you. Well, because we're doing it and you're just not going to be part of the solution. No, it's not going to work. Those people are called negative, and they're downers in companies, but they're saving your butts because they're analytical people. And unless they are just downer people, there are those people who really just are downer people. Debbie Downer, but it's really analytical thinking, critical thinking. Tear that idea apart. Make sure that we're really going to spend all this money on an idea that could actually work. Let's tear it apart. Really analyze that idea, and then lastly, there's that implementation. You need to it's got to be able to be implemented. Can we afford to do it? Can we implement? There's that engineer with a baling wire and the duct tape. Yeah, I'll make that work. not a problem. There's always the implementers. People test differently on each one of these. I test really big on number 3, idea generating. I love it. Yeah, woo, that's easy to idea, I'm terrible at the analytical part. I just want to go. Let's go. I'm ready. Let's go. No, let's think about this, all right? No, I don't want to think about this. I'm not good. I'm pretty good at implementing, but that's why teams are good, because everybody can contribute to this creative process. You don't have to be that creative person down the hall. Everybody's needed to contribute. Okay, next one is the second literacy, and I'm not going to spend as much time on these, is verbal literacy. Now, verbal literacy, that's my son writing a journal on a camping trip in Colorado. He kept a journal. I mean, like, who taught you to keep a journal? This kid's weird. So, I wrote downward spiral because, our language is in a downward spiral. It's no longer she and I will be attending. It's like me and her are going to come. And, and that happens every generation. And eventually it gets absorbed into the language and it becomes the language. We don't speak like Shakespeare anymore. Thank God. Although I love Shakespeare, but it's going to get, but this is conversational language. Like I have a social media class where all my students had to write blog pieces, and they had to blog every week. And we talked a lot about how to blog and how to engage your reader and all that kind of stuff. But like this one girl, she was a graduate student too. She writes, I read this thing and it says, oh my God, I was like sitting with my mom on the couch in the living room and like, oh my God, mom jumps to her feet and says, Whitney Houston died. Oh my God. And I jumped up and we both started screaming, Whitney's dead, Whitney's dead. And I'm reading this just like, and this is a graduate student, right? So I wrote her back and I said, listen, you don't have to grow up, but your writing has to grow up. And so you can stay a child, but your ideas and your writing and your skills have to grow up. But you stay that young person. That's good. And so she wrote back the most beautiful analysis of her feelings about Whitney dying, and her mother too. And it was night and day. She had it in her, but she just thought, oh, well, this is a blog, so it's informal. You know what? No. This is you publicly out there with your stupid words. And the truth, have anybody ever read like Cold Mountain in here? Or, there are books out there, or any great, great book that just had you just so captivated because of the way it was written. The words were put together in such a way, strung together, stitched together like pearls, so that you were taken away. Your imagination was just gone. It was out there. You were there. And I love that. I love being manipulated that way. I love a good story. And it really comes down to the art of wordsmithing. So really knowing how to write so that you can really get to people's imaginations. You can really engage them, even with a history lesson. Make it come alive. That's an art form, and that is a really important literacy. And I know we all know that. But the problem is that a lot of exercises are not really geared toward, again, there's that kid like me, but a lot of kids are like this, where does it have to always be turn in this paper, what I did on my summer vacation? Maybe you just do quick, like just for 5 minutes, we're going to do word associations, or we're going to do writing to a prompt, or we're going to do write 100 words about the guy sitting next to you, or something crazy, And speaking of this creativity, like I was giving a lecture to some other faculty on campus from different colleges about, I was one of several speakers speaking about creativity in the classroom. And this guy raised his hand and said, it's all well and good for you to talk about you being creative in the classroom because you teach art and drawing and, but I teach accounting. And that got the same response in the audience, which put me on the spot. But I really pulled this one out of my ass, I got to say. I said, and it was true. I don't know anything about accounting. You marry people who can do that stuff for you. That's why you marry them. Like my wife does our taxes. I haven't written a check in 30 years. You know, it's like, that's why you get married. So like, hey, we're a better person together than we are individually. So I would have married this accountant if I'd known him better, but it was like, hey, wait a minute, you know, I said, I don't know anything about accounting, but I do know it has to do with math and numbers and ledgers and books and all of that stuff. And I would just maybe have someone in the classroom be the embezzler that week, and the rest of the class has to figure out who in the class is the embezzler. And whoever is the embezzler, whoever finds out who the embezzler is gets a free Snickers bar. And then next week someone else gets to be the embezzler. And then you you know, you have games in the classroom. It's about game playing and role playing. Basically having fun, because we like to have fun. We like teachers who are stupid and crazy and like to be fun. Then we feel still awkward when we run into them in the grocery store. You're like, oh my God, you're a person. I thought you lived in the closet or something. So there are ways to get people engaged with words, you know, in any class, or whatever these literacies are. A third one, and the reason I use this photo is because I take a lot of students to Spain and stuff, and you know, I always look for the weird way of seeing things. You know, there are all those photos, and Facebook is just loaded with all the skinny arm pose all the girls are in, you know, like, and you know, stuff you just see a million times all the time, and it's like, well, you know, it's really fun visually to be surprised by something unusual. You know, we all love to be visually excited by something. It's like, oh my God, what a weird picture that is. I just jumped, they were all lying on this big sort of box. I don't even know what it was. It's about three feet off the ground, and I jumped up on top and I stood over them. They're all snoring because we'd had a long day in Segovia. And that's my son under the U. And I took their picture because it was weird. It was much better than just standing on the sidewalk and taking a picture of them lying on a box. So it's always looking and forcing yourself to basically see. You have to force yourself to see. Make yourself see in a new way, in a different way, that'll engage somebody. And how can you challenge your students to see things in different ways? And part of that is something that all these literacies can be learned. I wrote Learning to Look because when my sons were in school, in middle school, I painted a huge 40-foot mural for their hallway, but we also were very engaged parents in the sense that we taught a class called Learning to Look for the students, and so we had images just like this. There were probably these images, as a matter of fact. One of them was George Washington crossing the Delaware, and what we do is we teach the students how to look and how to see. Do you see any lines in this painting? Do you see any shapes? Do you see any, you know, what are the texture? We'd ask, you know, and so there were a certain list of things that we'd ask the students, little kids, to find, and they'd love to come up and point to it and trace their finger along a line, and they're seeing things, you know, and I wrote down, I think I wrote it down, macro to the micro, so there's the whole painting. What do you see? Well, you see these big pyramid, you know, structures, you know, there's the whole structure of the painting that's like a pyramid. The flag is way up there, and it all branches down, and there are these shapes that you see that are compositionally holding the entire painting together, but then you zoom down, and what do you see? Do you see anything little? There's a little bird. There's a bird on that branch, yeah. And so it's learning to look. So you teach them to see, you teach them. And I wrote down Spain because the thing I do is I take accountants and other people to Spain. I'm leaving in 2 weeks, actually. And it's no computers. It's all about seeing, all about visualizing their environment and the world around them. And so we're going to have a Madrid-wide treasure hunt. And they're going to have to hide something in Madrid, and then they hand make paper maps to find that treasure. You can do this with your students. Hand-drawn treasure maps. No words, just images that will lead the students, some other student to that treasure. You have to draw what they're looking for. Maybe it's a Livestrong bracelet. Maybe it's a Snickers bar. Maybe it's a peso or a euro. And so it's just forcing them to make stuff, to draw, and to think of their world in a visual way. I've got to draw a map of Madrid, and I've got to draw what this bracelet looks like so they know where to, and then where it's hidden behind the vending machine in this store. And it's really fun. That's just one of the many things we do. But it's teaching people, it's forcing them to see and not just write about everything like we all do, because it's easy to write, although it's not. And you know, it's basically the world is so complex nowadays, but sometimes you just get stuff. Like I was just taken to CERN, Switzerland to the Large Hadron Collider, and I went down into the detectors, and I took 3 students with me, and we did all the diagrams explaining the science that's going on there, because people get it when they see it drawn in storyboard form, or you know, step by step, or whatever it is. You know, so you know, it's about people see stuff and they just get it better, rather than just reading a big block of text about how this science works. But you see a picture, right away you're intrigued, because it's a picture. I'm going to die here. And it's a picture, right? So it helps understanding, it helps retention. You remember things better when you see them. You walk into a grocery store and you need to know where the peppers are. Zoom, there are the peppers. So you walk right over to them. You see that instantly. You're reading where the peppers are, walk into the store, turn right, you know. And that's the way most textbooks are, the way most learning is. It's all verbal. And our minds aren't just verbal. We're visual too. We hear things. It's all good. One of the literacies you showed was audio. There are a lot of different literacies. So a visual literacy, and the reason I wrote design on there is because design is everywhere. All design means, when you think about it, the word design, whether you're designing a program for your school, you're designing a page or a poster, whatever it is, you're designing a storyboard or a film or the opening slides to a film, it's making order out of chaos. That's all it is. You're making order out of chaos. There's all these ideas floating around. Let's structure them into something that has meaning. And design does that. And so it's important to sort of being able to connect all those pieces. Composition. Oh, rule of thirds in photography. Rather than just dead center somebody, step them off to the side of the frame and have more space. It's just a more interesting photo. Different angles, high, low, close, far away. All these different ways to shoot video, all these different ways to design a poster, having a hierarchy of type and color, use color for meaning, not just beach ball everything. So design's a very important thing for everybody to understand. Believe me, they don't get it. These students, these college students, don't design well at all. They don't get it. They don't know. Everyone thinks that word art is high art. Word art in PowerPoint, with those rainbow and mirror and those curvy everything. Bad, bad. Don't let Comic Sans. Oh my God, you're going to do something on Egypt? Type on the font has to be papyrus. It's a law. You'll go to hell if you don't use papyrus. And so we all become predictable pattern thinkers. We all use papyrus and Comic Sans and word art, because that's what these computer companies are all making us use. And because everybody uses it. But it makes shit designers when they get into the world. Predictable. I keep spitting. Thank God nobody's sitting there. So shake it up, you know? Here's my son when he looked like a girl. So 4. You can guess where this is going. Maybe not. But students nowadays, this wasn't so important when I was a kid, maybe even when you were a kid. But you know, they're at a disadvantage if they're not familiar with technology. They're just at a disadvantage. And you can't, as people, as teachers, you can't know everything. But you can ask yourself, what can you introduce to these people, to your students? What can you help them with? What can you challenge them with? There are professors here who just say, go do tutorials on YouTube. Everything's on YouTube. I have over 30 tutorials of my own on iMovie, mapping, charting, statistics, all that junk. So, you know, they need to, like, they need to know equipment, but they don't need to know, like, that kind of equipment. I teach a class with 200 students, and it's called Visualizing Information, Visual Communication, and we make movies with whatever they can fit their hands on. We don't give them big fancy equipment. They use their mom's point and shoot that records video, whatever it is, you know. I have one assignment in that class. Get this. This is the treasure hunt I told you about in Madrid with hand-drawn maps. Well, that's hard to do with, you know, 200-something students. So I thought, and the beauty of that assignment is nobody wants to screw their fellow student by doing a bad job. So they want to make sure they do a good job so nobody's mad at them for doing a bad job and making them wander around campus looking for something because their map is so stupid. But what we do is I have them locate the treasure on Google Maps. So I teach them how to make a Google map with a place mark, that kind of stuff. Draw a line from our building to wherever the treasure's hidden. It's a campus-wide treasure hunt. Then they put a place mark, 2 place marks on the spot on the building that it's located. It has to be in a building. And then I say, okay, so now imagine you're the student that has to find this treasure. They've looked at your Google map online now to get to the building. Now they're at the building and they're looking at the front door of this building that you told them to go to on this map. Well, now that's where the video takes over. So they have to shoot a video with that point and shoot camera or their phones or whatever, and they go, okay, you should be standing right here. And now you're going to walk into this building and then go down these stairs, and then they walk in and they'll see a vending machine. And the treasure is hidden right behind that vending machine. And that thing gets uploaded to YouTube. Then they take the embed code, paste that into the Google map, so that when they look at the Google map, they just click on the paste mark and the video plays. They don't have to go to YouTube. Same with the photo. They take a photo of the Live Strong bracelet or whatever it is that they hid, upload that to Flickr, pop that photo, embed code so that they click on the other place mark and it shows the photo. So the kids know what they're looking for and exactly where it is because the video showed them. Then when they find it, to prove to me that they actually did the assignment and didn't just go home, I have them shoot one of those Facebook pictures like this with their phone, and then they tweet it to the big screen in the classroom, and all the photos come up. And they have to put the name of the person whose treasure they were looking for so that everybody can go on Twitter that night and find the photo of the person finding their treasure. That's so many different technologies they're learning, and it's all fun. They don't even know they're learning. Yet they still try to cheat. I tell you, I don't know. They do. What's that? That's their creativity, how to get around it. And sometimes I applaud that. You know, if you can find a better way to do this, go for it. But this is what I suggest. So, equipment, software. You know, software is a grammar. They're all different, but they're all kind of the same. Like I was doing a layout in InDesign. I also used to use Quark Express in New York. My wife just said, "Can you redesign this?" It was done by an administrative assistant in her foundation. It was in Publisher on a PC, and so I figure. It's a grammar. I can learn Publisher. And so I relayed out her thing. It took me about 4 hours longer than it would have in InDesign, but I figured out most software has a file and an undo and all these kinds of things, and you can learn it, and so can students. If they understand that all software isn't vastly different, it's a grammar. You just have to learn how to see what's different about this software. What does it do? You know, how can you edit a video? Edit a video in YouTube or something, or you know, crop a photo or something like that. The internet, you know, let me tell you, internet and social media, they all think they know social media, like Facebook. Part of communication literacy out there is communicating your idea, getting it out there, getting people to read it, and connecting with other people and building a community around your idea or your video or your purpose. And that's a real art, is getting people connected through social media. Using how to use Facebook and Twitter and a blog and Tumblr and all these other technologies to build a community around what your idea is or your foundation is or your class is. So those are just all fun, and you can't know all these. Sometimes students are showing you how to do it. And then the last one, and this one I made up totally because I think this is important. That's Eric. He's a weird guy, but I love him. It's a theatrical literacy. Do you remember the story around the campfire? I'll tell you, when I was sitting with my dad, he'd come out just to scare us. We'd be spending the night out there where bugs in South America are this big with wings that are, they felt like they were this big. You go to class, the classroom they had there, and there'd be a bug on the wall as big as your fist. And you just hoped it didn't move through the whole class because nobody would go near it. Then your dad comes out that night and around the campfire. My dad, he was a civil engineer, but he could tell a story. We were showing that he became the beast. He became the killer. He became whatever it was. We were so terrified. We were no longer in a backyard. We were in his head. Because my dad threw himself into the story. He became the beast. And he would use intonation in his voice up and down to engage us and just to terrify us and to build suspense in such a way that when you're watching, tell your kids, these students, when they're watching a TV show and they start laughing, think about what made them laugh. There's a science to all of this. All humor is to take one idea that has an expected outcome and then throw another outcome at it. That's like, wait a minute, that's not supposed, and that's all humor is. You'll notice that now. Now that you notice that, every time you hear something funny that makes you laugh, you're going to go, oh, it had an unexpected outcome. I thought it was going to go this way, but it went that way instead. And you laughed because it was silly and funny. And the same with anything. You've got to get into the theater of the whole thing. I don't remember what my little points were here, but the campfire, yeah, you have to understand the human mind. Understand what motivates us to do things. What is it that we like? Ask yourself, what do you like? Ask your kids. How many of you in here want to tell us why you laugh? Why do you think you laugh? You know, get them to understand. And the reason I wrote Educate and Persuade is I have a lawyer friend. Okay, he's a judge. He's a conservative judge too, like appointed by George Bush. Very conservative. And we're very different. I'm liberal, he's conservative. He's a Christian, I'm an atheist, but we have great lunches. And he said that his job was to educate and persuade the jury. So he's up there, theatrical, when he was a lawyer. And his job was to educate them and then persuade them to go his way. And we all need to do that now. We need to educate our employer, our potential employer, about why we are the person for this job, and then persuade them to hire us. We have to educate the people about why our cause is so horrible, much worse than everybody else. Breast cancer, forget lung cancer. Breast cancer! You can't give money to everything, give it to me. Here's why, it's terrible. Now give it to me. And in order to do that, you have to engage them. You can have a damn good reason why you should be hired, but unless you've engaged them or found a way to capture their intention, they're not hearing you. I had an employer, an editor I used to work for the Associated Press too, and I would always bring all the Columbia University journalism students for the tour. He'd always give me the kids to give the tour to. Carl, can you give these kids a tour? Come on, guys. And I always took him through, and he always said the same thing. He'd walk in with his suspenders and his bow tie. He was an infantry leader in Vietnam. We all feared him. But I liked him, actually. Bill Ahern, great guy. But he would walk in and just terrify these kids. He had like that, you know, chiseled infantry leader, pockmarked face. Just, you know, and they'd all go, and he's the editor of news of the Associated Press. And he would walk in and he'd slam a stack on this conference room table in front of all these kids who'd just go, whoa. And he'd say, resumes from people just like you. Look how many I got. That's just today. They all knew he was lying. He'd go, wait a minute, what's that? And he'd reach in and he'd pull out a blue one. I noticed the blue one because it wasn't white. And he said, if you want to get my attention, you got to get my attention. You got to be standing outside the building when I go home and then attack me and say, can I buy you a cup of coffee? Because I really want to work for you. Do something to stand out. I had a girlfriend in New York who wanted to work for a fashion designer named Ole Cassini. I didn't like his stuff, but you know, what are you going to do? You know what she did? She left. She found out where he lived, which is creepy. And she left an orchid attached to a beautiful envelope with her resume, handwritten resume on it. She got a job. Everyone else emailing. There was no email back then. You know, writing letters, calling. Could I speak? Could I set up an interview? No. You leave me an orchid? Kids don't know this. Kids think they're like everyone else. How are they going to be different? I'm not creative. We have to unlearn all that. Remember, we're an amalgamation of everyone else's expectations. And it can be spur of the moment. You never know where a good idea is going to come up with. And that's what the last thing I want to show you is this kid here. The reason I showed him is we were in Paris last year, and we were looking at the Mona Lisa, and we saw people doing this. Like, that's the Mona Lisa. They were going like this. And then we could see in the camera this big dopey picture of their face, you know, with this little Mona Lisa in the background. And we were just like, everyone was doing it. Everyone was doing that. And my son said, let's do that from now on, everywhere we go. And I said, I don't care. And so I took every picture, but he's the one who, it looked like, he wanted it to look like this. So now, does this engage you? I think it will, because it's just so different. And it's consistent. And it's his own way of doing things. Versailles. So that's all I had to say. So I'm open for questions if you have any. You know, yes.
How did you happen to be there from ages 5 to 10? What did your parents do?
Oh, that's a good question. My dad was a civil engineer, and he married a Colombiana girl. My mother was from Bogotá, Colombia. Por eso hablo español como un colombiano. But he she wanted to be her parents, you know, those Colombian girls. So he said, well, that will be near her, but not too near them. So he got a job down there building a big dam to build a lake to supply hydroelectric power to Cali, 100 miles away. And they were up in Bogota, about a long way from him. So we were just the kids. These are all the engineers' kids. Engineers are cool.
So then why did you move back?
Oh, yeah, the dam got built. What's that?
They decided not to be by her parents anymore and moved back to the US.
My mother, yeah, my mom, I guess so. I never thought to ask them, you know. I was just, you know, when you're a kid, you go, oh, whatever, okay. So then I became this 5th grader in front of a bunch of American 5th graders, and with these classes of 30 people instead of 3, and it was very, very, you know, very different. Yes.
I heard Ed Tufte speak.
Yeah, I know. I've had lunch with that guy.
And he said, you know, not to do PowerPoints anymore. And I really liked the way you did your.
Can I tell you something? It's not the tool. It's the user. It's just a piece of software. There are beautiful things made in PowerPoint. Gorgeous things. I lecture over at the engineering college every year. All of those engineers have to make posters of their mechanical engineering device that they've invented, or, you know, for the big parents show. They put these big posters on an easel to explain what their experiment is. And I explain to them all the different literacies, different design literacies that they should incorporate into this poster. So it's not PowerPoint. PowerPoint is an evil. It's the person using it. If you have word art, comic book sans, gaudy colors, horribly pixelated photography, cliche things, you know, one piece of clip art that you stole from here that's a cartoon, another piece of clip art that's some horrible something, and it's just this collection of junk. It's really, my brother actually is also, he's more of a left brain person, which means he's more analytical, and he actually teaches people about PowerPoint, and one of the things he says is if you see the tool, then you've failed. It should be just seamless and invisible.
But he said the worst is when people read exactly what they're saying.
Yes, the thing is, like, I had bullet points there for 2 reasons. One is because I took out the bullet points, by the way. There were no bullet points, but that's just because people see bullet points and go, oh, you know. But for one, to remind myself what I wanted to say, because I have a terribly distractible mind as during notes from my...
You did that in PowerPoint?
No, I did this in Keynote, but it's the same thing.
Okay.
PowerPoint is even more powerful than Macintosh Keynote. All it is a blank slide. You can put Comic Sans and ugly clip art in there too.
Yeah, that was awesome.
It's all, so, and you figure out a couple little animation tools, and it can be fun. What people do that is criminal, I think it's just horrible for students especially, is they put bullet points up there and they read them. And then what's even worse is when they have bullet points up there and they're talking about stuff that hasn't anything to do with that. So there are 2 pieces of content being thrown at these kids, all verbal. That list and whatever he's saying or she's saying that has nothing to do with the list, or it's a broader picture of the list. So they can't do that. Nobody can. And no, it's so boring anyway. And people do it because they can't remember. The way to think about PowerPoint is if you're giving a talk, what you do is, and I didn't do this, what you do is the PowerPoint, there are different ways to engage people. If you're present, you're here. You can point to stuff and say, look at that. When I do a graphic for Newsweek, I couldn't be in millions of homes saying, okay, read this first. Okay, you've done, no, go here next. Okay, you get it? Because if you're confused, I'll explain it to you. You can't do that. It's got to do all its own job. So, but if you're doing a presentation, you can be there. So what I do, what I tell people, and I tell these engineering students, is create a presentation that is very entertaining, really engaging, really exciting for people to be there. They can't wait to see what the next slide's going to be. And then give them a handout with all the details that would be bullet pointed, your points you made. And if you need a few reminder words, you know, a few words of reminder up there, then it's not like reading big, long bullet points. So that if you're there, you can explain it and give them a handout with all the detail. If you're not there, like in Newsweek, you need to have enough text to explain what you're trying to explain. So you have to think of your audience and how it's going to be used. Yeah. What's that? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question for you.
Sure.
In order to, you know, you want to, when you're doing a photo history of anything, you want it not to be contrived. And I was wondering, perhaps some other people can comment on this. I've noticed, like, going to work, and I'm also a veteran, and sometimes I have to go to the VA hospital in Ann Arbor. But I've noticed it's a phenomenon. I've noticed here in many of these cities in this area where there are now beggars in the street. Men, usually men with signs around them, you know, says, you know, they're claiming they don't have any work. You know, they look destitute, and a lot of them are, you know, they look very forlorn and very, very distressed. If you wanted to do like a photo history of
that was me
folks,
when I first moved to New York. Yeah, before I got.
Yeah, well, this is very sad.
But I'm sorry. If you wanted to do a photo essay of
how do you do that without being contrived? You don't want someone posing. You want it to be natural. How do you go about doing that? And how do you go about doing that and you know, have something of substance and also something that's ethical?
Well, ethics is a huge topic on, and you know, but let me answer these things one at a time. I know a lot of photographers, documentary filmmakers. One of my TA, who's just graduated with her master's, spent 2 years at a school. I'm not saying anybody could spend 2 years, but with a school for African American kids in Detroit, and most of these shots of middle schoolers were very candid and real and painful. And she stood right there and we watched the film, and I asked her, how did you get these kids to not all just, when you put a camera in front of a 8th grader, they're like, you know, they're posing. And she said, I needed to be invisible. I needed them to be so sick of seeing me in that place and I needed them to know me and to get to know me. So what she did in the longer term was basically live with them and be there every day, so that she just became just part of the furniture, and they never saw her. She said somebody would always jump in front of the camera, but for the most part, they stopped noticing her. But if you want to do homeless people, if you really want to get to know a homeless person and actually document what their life is like, you have to spend a day or two with them.
These are homeless people, though. These are
destitute.
Who, I don't know if they're on, perhaps they are, you know, I really can't speculate. But they're people who are in need of work or money or food, and they're always stationed at intersections.
Oh, yes.
Where there's a traffic flow coming into that.
Yeah, and we all feel awkward and try to change lanes so that we're not next to them. But I don't know what you guys think, but what I think you need to do, everybody, even that person, wants to tell their story. They want their story to be heard, and they want it to be their story. They don't want it to be your impression of their story. They want it to be their story, and they don't want it to be a fake story, a pretend story, a cleaned up story. And in order to do that, and that's what some of the best photographers, I know a lot of amazing photographers, and what they do is they really get to know the subject. That kind of a story is called a feature story in news or a documentary story, and in order to make it authentic, you have to immerse yourself in that person's life. You have to know what the key moments are, and you have to get them to stop seeing the camera. And you can't just run down and say, hey, can I take your picture? you know, the kids or whoever, you have to let them know that you really do want to tell their story. You're not trying to tell a story for them. You want them to tell their story, and this camera will help you do it. And you have to, then on top of that, there are certain photo literacies that you can learn. And you don't even need to learn them, you just need to read them. Most people take, most things that we see in this world are chest level photos, you know, shot from about this distance. You know, that's almost all. But you stand up high, you get down really low, you set the camera on the table while you're having a cup of coffee with this guy, you know, and his sign is in the foreground and he's up there drinking his coffee and you click the camera. You know, unexpected photos where it actually, you create the drama that he's living or she's living. So, so there are ways to do photography so that it actually does engage people in a way that is, it engages the viewer, but it also tells a more authentic, dramatic story of that person's life. And in order to do that, you have to let them know you really do care and you really do want to tell their story. And to do that, you have to you have to push your comfort zone. Another thing we do in class, in creativity class, is push their comfort zone. I have the students do 6 things that push their comfort zone. To unlearn that amalgamation of everyone else's expectations, I make them push their comfort zone. And like one kid, you know, during one of the most fun days, we also do a lot of improv. One of the most fun days we had was, does anybody want to share what they did to push their comfort zone? For one student, it was asking a question in class. That's pushing her comfort zone. For another kid, he said, there was a woman, a middle-aged woman on her cell phone, and I walked up and her shoe was untied. I tied her shoe and walked away. I said, you did it. He goes, I did. And this other hand went up way back in the back of the class. It's this room next door. It seats 300. She says, I brought my dad to class, and there's this guy sitting there. All of a sudden, I was watching my language, you know. Somebody's dad, you know. So, but everybody had these great stories to tell, and it's by breaking the patterns of your own expected behavior. Well, I would never do that. Well, then you got to do it. But I would never grade anybody on what their comfort zone is. Only they know that, and I don't really care, you know. And then they write about it in journals, and they draw pictures, and you know, it's all stupid stuff. We can do one more question if you want. Can I do one more question, or? Yes.
Well, you talked about a picture being worth, 1,000 words. I was the president of a nursery school, preschool, and
Great.
I was asked to go and talk to the board of trustees at Michigan State, so they wouldn't close it. And
did they close it?
No. And what they did was, but this is what was so neat, is they said, you have to give a speech. I said, no, I don't give speeches. So I said, I will do something with pictures or with slides. This was a long time ago. Slides, and I took the song from the nursery school, The World is a Rainbow, and so it's only 3 minutes long, and so the slides had to fit in with this, you know, the outside of the building, the people from all the different countries. That was my push to keep it open. Anyway, to make a long story short, when I was finished, everybody stood up and clapped, but the best part of all was one of the Board of Trustees members. This has been going on for a year or more, maybe 2 years. And they were going to close this nursery school. He gets up and he says, there's no way you're going to close that nursery school. My son was that didn't get the name. Apparently never, the verbal, none of that worked. So I never forgot that. I thought, boy, did I learn something from that.
That's great. That's great. You know, again, that's a great example of just, you know, by the way, if you're willing to be the one to be pushing your comfort zone, making a dork of yourself in front of people, they'll be more comfortable making a dork in front of them. If everybody knows that it's okay to be a dork in this class, being uncomfortable, doing something unexpected, letting them know you don't know everything. Anybody know how to do this so they can show the rest of us? You know, just sort of just pushing that envelope and becoming learners and making them feel comfortable, and that being creative and knowing these literacies, it's just part of living. It's not something new. We will now be creative. It's just something they should all just graduate knowing. Like, hey, I know how to do the creative process. And storytelling, telling stories. So anyway, thanks a lot, you guys. This is great. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, well, you just now, you know, my wife is running a big event of the Eagle Eye Golf Club tonight for the East Lansing Education Foundation. She's the person doing that. So she's just, She just finished her speech to 300 people sitting at dinner tables. They got dinner at you know,
Are you
cheesecake.
expected now?
I don't know. Probably, I don't
Might
know.
be a good time to go get a free drink.
Yeah, there is an open bar.
Well, we all know where we go.
But anyway, thanks a lot, you guys. Thank you for having me. I really, thank you very much.